2. It starts in a dental engine and ends in a meat field. The man in white poked across his mouth, and the patient swallowed. "No, Doc, not there," he tried to say, but with the various metal tools in his mouth, the statement came out without consonants. "Oh, ugh. Can you open just a little wider? Just a little bit more." The dentist seemed to be asking Paulie to dislocate his jaw. "I'm not as young as I used to be," he wanted to joke, knowing that were he to attempt to say that, he'd likely spray the dentist with saliva and only be able to pronounce the vowels. Instead, he stretched his mouth open, feeling that same painful click he'd been experiencing every time he yawned. A squishy pop, not unlike pressing down on the base of your thumb with your opposite hand's pointer finger and the other thumb. "Quap," his temporomandibular joint said, quietly, while he accidentally gleeked his spittle on the dentist's face shield. "Okay, now hold that. Hold. Right there is perfect," he said, ignoring the saliva sliding down the clear plastic separating Paulie Galamb and his dentist. Paulie tried hard to focus on the spit itself, and not the mole under the dentist's left eye. It looked like a tiny inverted square tear, or maybe the state of Indiana, painted freckle brown. He was not sure. Thoughts of Indiana left his mind when the dentist poked something soft, something spongy, something that was most certainly not made of tooth, something certainly not wanting to be poked or prodded. Paulie made this clear by yelping under his breath and coughing the dentist's hands from his mouth. For a moment, Paulie thought he heard the dentist whispering into his mouth, but he was not sure. "Well, it's not an infected pocket. In fact, there's hardly a pocket at all. Mostly just the fresh regards of future scar tissue," the dentist reassured him, placing one tool down and grabbing another. Paulie half glanced at the metal tool in his hand and couldn't help but imagine it as some kind of double-sided fishhook with a pen-sized metal rod between each stabbing implement. Was this the Gracie Curette or the curved sickle scaler? He only knew these names because before his visit, he wanted something to distract him while this man fooled around in his mouth hole, or lack thereof. Earlier in the week, he had borrowed a trivia book that only captured his attention when he flipped to a page about the various odd names of dental equipment. There he took it upon himself to learn the names of the tools of his mouth-hole doctor's trade. With one hand, the dentist stuffed the mouth mirror back in the deep, far-down area where his wisdom tooth used to sleep undisturbed for 40 years, before some unexpected pocket of pus formed and inflated and forced this man to pluck the sneaky bonus bones from his jaw. The infection had pushed on the slumbering wisdom tooth, which pushed on his molars, on his canines and incisors. For 40 years, his teeth had been good enough for television. But after this muck-up, he was considering orthodontic assistance. Right now, he was considering pushing away the doctor and leaving this place, but he knew the pain would only follow him home. "However, I am also seeing no signs of scarring or tissue damage, which only concerns me," he said, putting emphasis on the word damage by poking him somewhere in the back half of his throat with the curette or the scaler, "because I am also not seeing any evidence that there ever was a wisdom tooth there." With his mouth once again dentist-free, Paulie used it to form words with both consonants and vowels used in unison. "Well, that doesn't make a lick of sense." "You're not wrong, Mr. Galamb. As I recall, I was the one that plucked that pesky poker out of you less than 2 weeks earlier." Paulie remembered. It had been less than 2 weeks. 9 days by his count. It was high on his list of his most painful experiences ever experienced in his 40 years of life. Worse than the double clavicle break of sophomore year. Worse than his first and second hernia. Worse even than his divorce 5 years earlier. For him, anyway. He imagined Tony was doing just fine wherever she was in Central City at this point.